centuries people has been learning lute with no previous musical experience, just like we do nowadays with modern musical instruments. Lute is just another musical instrument and has got its own difficulties. I think that the biggest issue about lute is not a mechanical matter of using hands, but it's rather that we have to learn to think a completely different way. We have to try to enter a very different world, and we try to think ourselves as men and women of Renaissance and Baroque era. We have to try as well to get familiar with terms and concepts like counterpoint, like pavana, like fantasia or gagliarda. But I think that if you are here, you are somehow fascinated by learning and discovering these things. Big help for those who cannot read music is the fact that 90% of lute music is written in tablature that you already learned to read in previous tutorials. Tablature is a pattern of writing music, otherwise very complex to write down in modern notation. So in the end, I would absolutely recommend and suggest and encourage every one of you to try to learn to play lute and play a little bit of this gorgeous music and to enter this magical and forgotten world. Unfortunately, you can go to the local musical instrument shop and hope to find a lute. You can choose either to buy a second-hand instrument or to ask a lute maker to make a brand new one for you. In my website antiquamusica.net you will find some links to lute maker sites and also some link where you can read about second-hand instruments to be sold. It depends on which repertoire you're willing to play. The idea of buying an instrument that would allow you to play a repertoire spanning over 3 centuries is simply not realistic. For the earliest repertoire, let's say Danza, Spinacino and Francesco da Milano, for example, and music for the early Renaissance, the best choice would be a 6-course lute. Obviously, with such an instrument, you may miss a lot of lute music, for example by Jan Dahlen, Holberg, Katzberger and Piccinini, and generally music that requires a higher number of courses than 6. A 7-course lute, for example, would be a good choice for playing both early music and a lot of Dahlen music as well. An 8-course lute would be good as well, yet even though 8-course lute are very popular, it's very difficult to find music that will require all of 8 courses. If you're interested in early Baroque music, and such as Katzberger music, or also ballet, or also Holberg and Piccinini, I would recommend you to buy a 10-course lute. It is true that with such an instrument you would be technically able to play earlier music, having more strings than required from this repertoire, from this earlier repertoire. The fact is that the final outcome would be rather unlikely, because you would have too many resonant courses that would harm the subtle counterpoint lines of the early repertoire. So, in the end, if you're looking for your first instrument, I would suggest you to buy a 7-course lute that would cover both early Renaissance repertoire, like Spinacino, D'Alsa, Francesco da Milano, Gorzanis, as well as much music, for example, by John Dowland. And this means a very large amount of beautiful music.